Well, what we're going to do now, because we've had a little bit of a change in our program, is go to our panelists who are up there on the podium, and they're going to be giving us a lot of different aspects of this entire issue of why are they continuing to eradicate this moth when it's not even a threat. And one of the leading people in the state who's been making that point for so, many months is our first speaker, Dr. Daniel Harder, who's the executive director of the Arboretum at UC Santa Cruz. And if you heard about the scientists who went to New Zealand, who did a great study there that showed that the moth is not this voracious, rapacious, killer of everything on the planet Earth, this was the man. This was the man. And so he brings a desperate note of reality to the insanity that we keep hearing from CDFA. So Dr. Harder, if you could tell us right now, and I hope those mics work better than this one, what your thinking is now that you've heard that the program goes on, minus this one component, what does this lessons from New Zealand teach us? Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and really we need to congratulate ourselves on taking the aerial port of this program, at least off temporarily. And we all need to be definitely patting ourselves on the back, because it was a huge effort, and sometimes it seemed insurmountable hearing what we were hearing. Most of you know my background and involvement. The aerial spraying portion was the personal side that I was most concerned about, raising 2 children and living under a spray zone. I was mostly concerned about the long-term effects and pointed those out repeatedly. But believe me, it's not over, and as was pointed out before, it's full steam ahead for CDFA and USDA to eradicate the light brown apple moth. The reason why they're contesting or looking at the court cases in Monterey and Santa Cruz is because they want to have the aerial portion of that tool to be able to be used when they need to use it. And I'm suspicious. Also, all the quarantines are still in place. All the very expensive quarantine requirements for retail nurseries, food exporters are still in place and being enforced. And that means at all retail nurseries every 2 weeks of USDA inspections, and can have entire premises spraying of spinosad or BT or other kinds of control measures. Even chlorpyrifos is still in the arsenal for doing all premises sprays. They are required on a suspicion of a single larvae. And it's costing retail nurseries anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a year to deal with this moth, just so they can move their product out. And some retailers are going out of business, and the pressure is still on for those kinds of things. As the court's proven, it's not an emergency. The light brown apple moth was never an emergency, given that it was probably been here 30 to 50 years. Maybe it's been here all along and we just realized it was here. Now we've got this great trapping program telling us that it's all over the place. And I think that the court cases do prove that there really was no emergency, there is no damage. So what are we fighting this thing with a $100 million project, fighting a moth that causes no damage? Places like New Zealand, the UK, England, France, they're still saying it's a minor pest. We've contacted all the agricultural ministries and forestry ministries, and they've said the same thing. We don't consider that a pest. What's the big deal? We've never tried to eradicate it. Why is it such a big concern here, and we spend so much money on it? And light brown apple moth, as we've found, can be safely managed. It's easy to control to 0 tolerance levels. So really, the quarantine restrictions that are imposed by the countries that we say are causing all the problems, Canada and Mexico, are not valid, because they've told us in writing that they would change their classification if the United States deemed it necessary, and that it can be safely managed to 0 tolerances. So if we get 0 LBAM on the things we're sending to them, there should be no quarantine restrictions. Absolutely none. And we know the methodology. It can stay in ag. It doesn't have to involve wild lands. We know that forests are never been threatened by the light brown apple moth. It's a leaf roller. And predators too. Leaf rollers will respond to the population that's there. I'll talk about the sterile insect technology in just a moment. I crossed out a bunch of my points from my previous talks about the aerial spray and the tiny capsules and but long-term health effects for the things they're testing. Before we had this one kernel that we could all attack, this aerial spray, it's on these people, it's all these things. Now the thing is just broken into small little bombs like, okay, the splat technology and this, what is the mobile fogging, what does that mean? What about the traps? What about the attract and capture? What about all these other technologies? Now, I'm going back and trying to figure out what the science is around these things. And the science wasn't there to begin with. This is not an emergency. There is no justification for going after it and trying to eradicate it. And there is no efficacy of the methodology. And that's consistent between the pheromone treatments and this sterile insect technology. A moth's never been used in a sterile insect technology procedure before, and never to eradicate. Sterile insect technology is to control. And the CDFA needs emergency status, and they need to go after this thing right away. And so the sterile insect technology is going to be, they think, overwhelming, and it's going to show the way of California's technology and innovation in using new techniques to get rid of an insect. A.G. Kawamura uses the example of the pink boll weevil, and that California worked for 15 to 20 years in addressing this insect and eradicated it successfully. Well, pink boll weevil only feeds on cotton. It's only a single crop. They got rid of it by spraying pesticides and plowing in fields for years after years after years until it didn't show up anymore. Well, we don't have that luxury here with the light brown apple moth. It already is entrenched. It's naturalized in our ecosystem, and it's being controlled by native predators. I've raised 30 larvae of light brown apple moth at the Arboretum on media I've got from Driscoll strawberries to grow these things, and 18 of the 30 larvae have not developed normally, or parasites have come out of them. Have you ever grown a larvae and put it in a cup and had wasps come out of it? This is what I'm seeing in these things. And I'm giving the wasps to researchers at Berkeley and CDFA saying, here they are. There's more than 50% of the larvae I'm just picking up already affected by parasites and parasitoids. So it's already being under control, and that's no surprise. There's 300 species of tortuous moth in California, all being preyed upon. You throw 100 million males out there, what are the predators of these things going to do? They are going to wipe out not only the light brown apple moth, but everything else. All these other tortuous moths that nobody's going to be monitoring for because there's going to be no EIR. Imagine throwing this kind of food source out and the predators responding to this massive amount of food. Then they eliminate it all because light brown apple moth are only going to be all the same age. They're going to die in 2 weeks. Then all these predators are going to be around. It's the same thing as releasing the wasps. They're going to find a food source and they're going to exploit it and respond to it. And if they do this year after year after year, we're going to have troubles with predators on our native moths. I believe, and Jim Carrey also believes, that UC really has a role to play, and we're pushing on the Office of the President to have independent review. When it was offered to CDFA that UC would impanel a group of experts to look at the eradication program of light brown apple moth, CDFA refused any help from UC, and it's a very interesting development. Reclassification really is the key to take LBAM all off the platter, and we're working towards it. We have a draft written in almost final form. This is something that any citizen can move forward, and it has to be acted upon. I can see a lot of foot dragging with USDA in this process. They could drag on for years not picking up the reclassification, but we need to force that. Once it's developed, we need to force it, because this is not a pest we need to be fighting with hundreds of millions of dollars. But wasting money isn't going to do it. Telling them they're wasting money is not going to stop this program. It's all the other things that are associated with trying to control this moth, which isn't a problem. There's an environmental task force meeting, a research meeting, sometime in July, I think third week in July, where all the USDA and all the CDFA people are coming to a hotel near the airport. I don't have the details. Foster City, sorry. And they're going to have 3 days of meetings, and like half of one day is going to be public. And they've asked several people to speak. I'm not going to be able to be here because I'm going to be traveling, but I could imagine if I had to present at that meeting, and imagine the room being stacked with USDA people on money line items and money that associated with light brown apple moth. I'm a botanist. I would be eviscerated in front of everybody, and I'm leery of how they're going to use that meeting to self-promote what this program is all about. Let me tell you about sterile insect technology. This is where you raise insects and you irradiate them when they're living. There's no radiation in these things. It just prevents them from developing their sexual organs. And so that as adults, they come out and they're released. And the idea is that you'll saturate an area with male moss. I don't know how they're going to separate male and female. It's going to be interesting how that technology is going to happen. But then they just saturate an area with male moss, and then the male moss that they're releasing are supposed to outcompete the native moss that are there. Well, this isn't going to work if you've got a lot of moss around, because there's a behavior that's known in tortricid moss and moss in general, that males emerge before the females, and they will go guard pupae that they know are females. So you'll have males that are sitting next to pupae before they hatch and ready to mate as soon as the female comes out. And this is an innate behavior that's you might only see it in wild types. Sterile insect technology, since they're raised in the lab, are a little bit not quite as aggressive as the wild types. So we're going to see 100 million moss around, but they're not going to be able to compete with wild types of this moth. Another interesting aspect of sterile insect technology is, and LBAM, is that light brown apple moth females mate multiple times in their lifetime. Ineffective mating will only cause them to continue to mate until they raise eggs. If you don't mate, you live longer until you are able to be fertilized and lay eggs. So you're going to have females living longer, waiting for a male that can actually fertilize and make eggs, and the things aren't going to die. I mean, it's just, it seems silly that you're just going to see these moths being dropped out of airplanes. And Max Suckling, who's on the technical working group for the light brown apple moth from New Zealand, who's an insect pheromones expert, has proposed using sterile moths as a vehicle for delivering the pheromone. So what they'll do is they'll spray these moths with pheromone prior to their release, and then they will release the moths out as a way of distributing the pheromone. This is a very interesting technology that's brand new, but it's not beyond what this group might do. And what are the inerts in that case? Moth bodies, moth legs. And again, like I said, it's not a technology for eradicating anything. It's never happened, there's no precedent for it. We really need to watch what they're talking about. I mean, the question about what's an urban area, what's a rural area. We got lots of forested areas where you can't see the roofs of houses. What's going to happen in those areas? And there isn't enough detail about what they've proposed as an alternative that we can't. It's hard for anybody to criticize, and that's a good strategy for them. Let's get them running all different directions, and then we'll pick what we're going to do. And in Sonoma they're going to be using twist ties. In my neighborhood they're going to be using splat, and it's going to be really hard to chase after this. And a lot of effort has gone out of the sales of this whole effort because, it's not going to happen in urban areas. But boy, people are going to still be affected by it. Nurseries are still going to be dealing with quarantines. Exporters are going to still have trouble getting their products out. And it's not something we need to be fighting. Thank you.